Welcome back to the Sound of Loneliness podcast. We hope you are inspired by the voices of grit and grace we share in these episodes. A reminder to like, follow, and subscribe to the Sound of Loneliness podcast wherever you listen and to our YouTube channel. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star rating and we can keep offering you more of what you'd like to listen to. Before we begin, we'd like to remind everyone that this podcast is separate from our clinical work at Valley Connections Counselling. The contents of this podcast should not be used as a replacement to accessing personalized mental health help or support. Today's episode is called Communication Bootcamp, and Kiara's with me today.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi. So we're going to be talking about talking and about conflict. And I was just noticing that we've got, what did you call it? A meaty
topic.
We do. We have lots of information to share about, I think, something that people really are always looking for more support with, more tools.
Yeah. So talking about communication strategies, repair strategies, these are really relevant to romantic relationships, but can also be extended to kind of all relationships. And there's a lot of amazing leaders in the field who we want to make sure we give credit to, because throughout the episode, we're going to reference a lot of their work and kind of compile their research in different ways. So, you know, we talk about a lot of Imago techniques that comes from Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt. We're going to reference work from John Gottman and Julie Gottman, who created the Gottman method. We'll touch on some work from Esther Perel, and as well, we'll talk about Julie Manano. So just wanting to make sure we're shouting out those wonderful humans before we get started.
Yes, and any of the therapists that we've had along the way that have also been influential, but, you know, maybe they've been teaching us some of this work. I had a therapist that taught me a lot of Imago stuff, and super appreciative for learning it that way as well. So whether we learned it through books and school trainings or whether we were clients learning it from some wonderful therapists. So, I mean, if we want to start off with Esther Perel, she's got an interesting, oh my God, what is the word for this?
Quote?
Yeah, she has an interesting quote.
Yes.
Well, it's going to be one of those
Friday.
recordings. Okay. It's Friday.
Yes.
So she says, in relationships, trust isn't a promise to never hurt each other. It's the risk that we will hurt each other and the confidence that if we do, we will come together to heal.
I heard her say that recently, and it just started really spinning the wheels for me. You know, as a therapist, we think about our goal to support clients and to bring them together and to connect, but not under this false premise that we're not going to hurt each other. There's not going to be conflict. That's kind of inevitable in all relationships. So instead of trying to avoid that or pretend it's not going to happen, can we actually lean into that a little bit and not be so scared of it and learn the tools to be able to get through it in a way that keeps us connected?
Yes. I think I can sort of see some people cringing when we say, no, like you can't avoid conflict completely when you're in a relationship. I think it's helpful to kind of mention here, we're not talking about the kind of conflict that involves abuse. We're not talking about things where there is no safety. And we're not just, when I say abuse, I am not just referring to physical abuse. Emotional abuse and the emotional impact of physical abuse are massive.
Yes.
And if you're in a relationship where the dynamic between you is abusive,
yes,
that is not what we're referring to when we talk about conflict today.
Yes.
So what we're talking about is the type of stuff that comes up between two people in any type of relationship where there's disagreements because there's something like close to 70% of what we don't agree on, we're never really going to see eye to eye on, but that's not a problem. It sounds like it is, but that in of itself is not the problem. It's, can we learn how to communicate about things we don't necessarily agree on? What are our strategies for that? Can we go back and repair when we've, misstepped, when we've created some damage without meaning to? And I think that's the other important thing, is to really make sure that we try to regard our partner as someone who's not intending to injure us, which is, again, why I'm saying we're not talking about abusive relationships here. We're talking about relationships where sometimes I say something and then I go, oh, shoot, that's not how I meant to say it. And I hurt my partner and I didn't mean to. Most of the time when we have couples in our office, neither one wants to hurt the other one. They certainly don't want to be hurting themselves either, but they definitely aren't going out having conversations with their partner with this malicious intent to hurt them, wound them, trigger them. And so when we really realize that, okay, my partner is actually on my side, then I can be collaborative, right? And I can think about why might I try to come together and heal some of these hurts that have been caused. And why might I spend time learning some of these tools so that we're not avoiding conflict, we're engaging it in a healthier way, and we're recreating the dynamic between us.
Absolutely. So I think that's so important that you called that out, that basically everything we talked about or we're going to talk about today rests on the premise that there's emotional safety and that we can continue to create that emotional safety.
Yes.
And if that's not part of the picture, then this might not be applicable.
Yes. And so if we're talking about creating emotional safety, then one of the best things to do is to talk about, when do we talk about things?
Yes.
So this is one of the first tools when we talk about communication skills between partners is, do you know how to tell when you are in a regulated or dysregulated state? And do you have skills in your repertoire for how to bring yourself into a regulated state when you discover that you're not? Because that is not the good time to bring up conflict. So
Absolutely.
A lot of times with my couples, I say, let's not bring up conversations that are hefty ones past a certain time at night. Let's say past 9 p.m. Because usually it's harder for us to regulate our emotional and physical states as we get more tired, as the day has gone on, as it gets later. And those conversations are less likely to go well, and which it means it's increasing the chance that we're going to need to do a repair. Right? So really, really important that before we even decide to bring up a conversation, that we would look at our own state, perhaps the state of our partner, and then decide, is this the right time for me to be bringing this up?
I really like the stoplight metaphor that I know we've both used with clients. So thinking about a red, yellow, and green light. And when we're in our green light, we are feeling pretty regulated. We're feeling pretty calm, comfortable, hopefully safe, at ease. We're able to communicate effectively. We've maybe been rested, we've eaten, we're not coming out of a really stressful day. So usually a lot of us, it's pretty easy to recognize when we're in green. When we're in red, that's when we're quite dysregulated. You might notice your heart rate's increasing, you're clenching your jaw, you might feel a little bit hot. So there's oftentimes like physiological symptoms that you'll notice when you're in red. And that's definitely not the time to talk, because even from a neuroscience perspective, it's like that prefrontal cortex that allows us to think clearly, think about consequences, make decisions. It's kind of offline. We're kind of in that fight or flight stance. The thing that's tricky for a lot of us is recognizing when we're in yellow. And yellow is when we're just starting to get a little flooded, a little activated. We're like, this isn't feeling so great in my body. A lot of us think we go from green to red in the matter of seconds, but there is this yellow zone.
Yes.
And oftentimes I know we both talk to clients about start to learn what your yellow looks like. So as you notice those early signs, you can communicate that with your partner and say, actually, I don't know if this is a good time, or can we take a little bit of a break? So just really prepping for that, right? Being aware.
So I also love that what you're saying is then communicate that to your partner. So that can't be used as, a weakness that's used against you. Like, I'm not feeling like super regulated right now. This is not a good time for me to talk. That should be blanket respect in response to that of absolutely, when would you like to talk about this? When would be a better time for us to revisit this? When we decide this is not a good time because I'm in that yellow amber alert kind of mode, then we need to be able to communicate that We need to be aware ourselves. We need to communicate it to our partner and know that it's going to be respected and responded to in a positive way, because it's actually a sign of incredible wisdom. It's a lot harder to hold yourself back from getting into it with your partner when you really want to talk about something, when something's been bothering you for a long time, or when you're used to having kids in the way all the time, or something else in the way, too much work, too much other stressors. And then finally the two of you are by yourselves. Everybody else is asleep. And you're like, all right, now's the time. It makes sense. Life can be chaotic. It makes sense that we go, listen, like, I don't have a lot of time to delve into issues. Now's the time. But if you delve into it at the wrong time, it's going to take longer. There's going to be damage, which means you're going to have to revisit and repair if you don't avoid it. And there's going to be collateral damage. That all takes way more time than deciding this is not the right time. I must regulate. I must be regulated to do this. And then we can have a pretty succinct conversation, right, at a different time without a whole lot of collateral damage, if any.
So this is like the preventative prep work.
Yeah.
And we can't emphasize enough how important preparation for dialogue is.
Yes. And that also means that all the times that you're not together with your partner, the way that you take care of yourself is preparation for your time when you are with your partner. So how you treat your body, your mind, your spirit, your heart in the off times is the thing that impacts your relationship as well. It doesn't just have a positive impact on you, it has a positive impact on the us as well. Right?
Yeah.
So yes, the prep work, if you take good care of yourself, if you are constantly working on healthy coping strategies that keep you in that green zone or bring you back to it, then you are obviously helping your relationship by proxy. Right?
Yes. Yeah. So this leads us to another point that you mentioned a bit earlier before we started recording. And I forgot about this stat because I think it's so interesting. 97% of the time, the way a conversation starts is how it's going to end.
Yes.
Which again just emphasizes,
that.
Yeah, the Gottman say that. So it just emphasizes again this point we're making about just be really mindful of how you're starting these conversations.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So if you are in an elevated state, it will be conveyed in your body language, in your tone of voice, and in the type of words that you use. Then it's probably not going to go well or end well. So if we know that a good percentage of the time that the predictor of how a conversation is going to end is how it begins, then think how you would like to start the conversation. So let's say you're feeling pretty regulated. It seems like a good time to bring it up. Your partner looks pretty open. Then we need to look at things like, what words do we use? And what kind of body language do we convey while we're using them? So this is very stereotypical stuff. Use I language. And what's the point of that? The point is not just to prove that movies convey funny stuff about therapists. It's not just about that. Use your I language so that you are not making your partner feel attacked, so that it's less likely that they're going to feel like they need to defend themselves. So use your language to communicate what your experience is about the thing that's bothering you. Use your I language to talk about how you feel about that, and then use your I language to communicate your need. Don't make your partner try and read your mind and figure out how you feel, why it's bothering you, and what it is that they need to do. That's not fair. Mind reading is not something that we're ever supposed to have to do for other people. And we need to be able to communicate these things in a way where our body language is open and respectful. Our tone of voice is conveying that we're in a regulated state and that we are communicating in a way where we have the intention set that I'm trying to share something with you, not I'm trying to convince you of something, or I'm trying to blame you for something, or I'm trying to catch you in something, right? It's I need to communicate something to you.
Yeah. So thinking about these things can help us avoid getting stuck in the criticism defend cycle.
Yes.
It's the attack defend cycle that it's this dance that we end up trapped in.
Yes.
And so if we can start with what you're saying, which Gottman kind of refers to as the softened startup, if we can really embrace that softened approach, then instead of the partner going into this stance of having to defend, perhaps what they can do is actually approach it with curiosity, because the wall is down. And now they can just be open to receiving what's coming their way because it's not coming in a way that's really harsh.
Right. That's right. So, ideally, if I need to communicate something to you, I need you to be willing to listen. And I can do a lot of reading of you to see whether you're able to listen and to see how you're receiving the message that I'm sending to you. So I think staying collaborative with the person that I'm talking to is really important. If I'm flooded, I'm going to flood my partner, right? So if I find that I'm getting toward flooded, or I can see that my partner's getting flooded, that would be a really good time to take a break. The very minimum amount of time to take a break is 20 minutes. If we look at the physiology that happens when we're in a stress state and what's needed to bring us back to baseline. And when we say 20 minutes, I always joke and say that's like for a Zen Buddhist. That's for somebody who's like super good at autonomic regulation, right? And can just bring themselves right back. So it is okay if it takes you much longer. That's just normal. And it's much better to take what you need. However, we usually say, if you're going to take a break, tell your partner you're taking a break. Don't just leave. So we don't want to trigger any abandonment feelings. So we would communicate, I'm not able to keep talking right now. I do need to go and kind of cool off, and I am coming back. All of that actually has to be said. So that's also why it's important to catch ourselves before we're totally in the red, so we can still communicate that. And generally speaking, we invite people to come back to the table within 24 hours max. Why? Yeah. Because if someone has brought up an issue, clearly it's very important to them. And so out of respect, we want to have a respectful conversation. So we want to be regulated, but we also want to say, I know this is important to you. I am coming back. Right? Yeah. This is not a permanent abandonment. This is not a control thing. This is I want to do this well. I want to be present, open, and respectful. And so I'm going to make sure I'm in the state to do that. So I'm coming back.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we've even suggested to couples to create a code word. So kind of saying one word that encompasses this, because sometimes if you're already in that yellow or red kind of flooded zone and you start to explain, I have to take a break, that can even escalate into further conflict, right? Or the other person's like, you always do this. And so it's like, maybe you create a code word that when that word is said, it's like, break, everyone scatter.
Yeah. Yes. Right? And scatter, because there's usually the suggestion is get out of physical range of your partner, because you're likely taking on their energy and sharing your energy with them. And if it's not good energy, it's probably not going to help either of you de-escalate. Don't take on anybody else's energy either. So don't go calling up your mother or mother-in-law to tell them how terrible your partner is or your bestie, right? Because you might take on their energy as well. Because, people that care about us, they're protective of us. So they hear something going on and then they're going to get all feisty, right? Which is well-intentioned, but not useful at that time. If our job is to self-soothe and regulate, then what we want to do is we want to go for a walk, listen to music, listen to a podcast, right? Do some mindfulness or meditation, some deep breathing, read, put your hands in the soil. My mother would tell me to take a shower because she says water's healing. So wash it off, right? So something like that, do it long enough and be present. So don't dissociate. You got to keep yourself present and then check in, right? So come back, check in with yourself. Am I regulated now? Is this a good time? Check in with your partner. Can we try again? I'd like a take two. I want to see if we can start this conversation again. Be open to their response. And then you need a soften startup.
Yeah,
so absolutely. We need to go back to that. Okay, sorry about that, right? We can say sorry. We can own. We can have an apology if we need to. And then let's try this again, right? And remembering to stay connected. So setting your intention, right? So what is my goal here? Is my goal to change my partner's behavior, right? Is my goal to fix what's going on here? Or is my goal to be heard and understood?
Yeah. So actually thinking about your intention, and then if you can verbalize that to your partner. So imagine if you're in a fight and you verbally say, my intention is to convince you that you're wrong all the time. That's not going to go well. And how many of us have actually thought that? I mean, a lot of us,
Thought
right?
it, maybe haven't said it.
Yeah, you go into a fight and you're kind of secretly thinking like, okay, I'm just going to make sure that by the end of this, they know that I'm right. So if you can really catch what your intention is and think of it in a way of how do we make sure we stay connected? How do I do my best to not hurt you? And then say it. So then imagine you're coming to the table saying, this might be tough, but I just need you to know that I'm not showing up here trying to hurt you. I just want to understand you a little bit more, and I hope that you could understand me.
Yeah.
That really changes the way that we come to the table.
It sure does. I remember one of my therapists used to say, you can be right or you can be in a relationship. Right? And
yes.
What? I never get to be right if I'm in a relationship? No, not quite. But if your goal is, if you think the idea of being heard means the idea of your partner now thinking you're right, you're confused about what it means to be heard.
Yes.
Right? So when I feel truly heard, it means that my partner could then say back to me what he's heard me say and be pretty darn accurate. And he could also be able to understand, even if it's not how he would feel, he'd be able to verbalize why this thing is bothering me, why I'm upset, why I'm bringing it up. And he'd probably be able to say like what I need, why it's important to me that I get what I need here. And he would understand how I've been feeling. That makes me feel heard and understood. Nowhere in there do I say, in order to feel heard, he has to agree with me. He has to think I'm right. He has to then go and change his behavior. That's like a whole other land, right? What I need to do is first feel like he gets me. So does he have the capacity to hear me and understand me? Do I have the capacity to deliver the message in such a way that he can hear me and understand me?
And when you focused or when you talked about feeling heard, you specifically mentioned, does this person kind of hear the way that I feel and understand my needs?
Yes.
And to me, that really illuminates the idea that none of this is actually about the thing, right? So Julie Manano says, the problem is never the problem.
Yep.
It's not about loading the dishwasher or the housework or, folding the laundry, whatever.
Yeah.
It's not about that. It's about the deeper meaning.
Yes.
The emotions, the attachment wounds. That's actually what it's about.
Yeah, because the example I always like to use is you're upset because your partner is constantly leaving their socks on the floor right in front of the hamper. And you've talked about this over and over and over, right? The issue's not the socks. The problem is not the socks. The socks are not the problem, right? And if we are still talking on the surface of an issue and we actually still think the problem is the socks, we have another problem.
Yes.
We need to get out of the content of the conversation and move into the process, right? What is happening between you and I, right? What is happening for me in my mind? What's going on for me in relation to the socks, right? What do the socks represent? I cannot believe we're having a conversation about socks, but that's the sort of lighthearted kind of example that I often use with clients is like, the problem's not the socks.
Well, I mean, I can actually relate to this. That conversation's come up a million times in my house. The socks are 2 inches from the laundry basket. What is going on?
What is happening here?
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
So the tool that we love to reference for this, that maybe we can dive into next, is Imago dialogue, because Imago has a beautiful way of taking us from content and moving into process.
Yes, so that we can figure out, if it's not the socks, what the heck is it?
Yes.
So I think it's a perfect time for us to take a little break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about Imago. We'll talk about that dialogue that we often teach couples, that we use ourselves.
Yes.
And how does that help us to connect with our partners further? So we'll be back. Welcome back. We are doing our communication boot camp, and we're just about to discuss how to use something called an Imago dialogue. And this is something that was developed by Harville Hendricks and Helen LaKelly Hunt as a tool to help couples to be able to address conflict in a different way. So the way that we usually talk about things that bother us is I say something that's bothering me, and then you respond with defense or a counterattack or a blame of something that's bothering you, or, shut down, right? Avoidance. It usually goes back and forth, back and forth. So we have like two senders, right? And really no receivers, right? So this is a completely different way. When we introduce it to couples, I think sometimes they're like, huh?
Yeah.
Because it's a very different method. But the thing is, if we keep doing the same style of conflict, we're going to get the same outcome. And so instead it's let's try something different and see how this goes, which when this is used well, when this is used properly and we stay within the lines, it's actually really effective.
Yeah, and it's effective at hearing each other.
Yes.
It's not for the purposes of solving, and I can't emphasize that enough.
Yes.
The goal of this exercise is not to get to a place where you've solved or fixed the problem.
Yep.
Because again, as the Gottman method states, 69% of perpetual relationship issues are actually unsolvable. So the goal is not to solve. The goal is, how do we talk about this in a way that keeps us connected, that is respectful, and that maintains emotional safety?
Yes. So that's the first thing that we need to do, is define who's being the sender and who's being the receiver, because our goal here is to hear out an issue. And to hear it out fully, we can't both be senders. So we have a couple of sort of ground rules. One is that we have to have a little mental parking lot where we put in all of our shaming, blaming, criticism, counterattack, and
Eye rolls.
eye rolls and like shoulder shrugs and any of those kinds of feedback that are not going to convey that we're open, and they're not going to encourage our partner to keep speaking. We have to be able to use our parking lot. And as the sender, we're going to use I language wherever possible and try to speak in terms of how our perspective has been, how we've been affected, and stay away from the you. You did this, you did that. So you and I will do an example, right?
Yeah, we'll do an example.
Yeah.
So Imago basically, it calls out, they call it the boxes. So basically it's a step-by-step for how to articulate or how to send the issue. And the goal is to take it one box or one step at a time.
Yeah.
And then the idea is that the receiver is going to stay curious, and actually they would mirror back each box or each part verbatim to make sure that the sender is really feeling heard.
Yes.
So to kind of spell this out, I'll describe what each box or each part is, the goal of them. And then you can maybe use our sock example, because I think a lot of people can relate, to kind of give a sense of what it feels like.
And then maybe you can show us what mirroring actually sounds like.
Yes.
Because I think we all think we are fantastic listeners. And then when it comes down to it, when I say, no, don't add your 2 cents to it, just mirror back what you heard, it's actually a lot harder because you really have to listen.
Yes.
To be able to do it, right? And you have to be able to, have some self-control, some regulation, some emotional containment to not go, yeah, but, no, there's no yeah, but in this. Mm-hmm. There's just reflecting back what you hear until the person's all done sending their boxes of information. Then we can change roles. Then I'll be the receiver, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so, absolutely. In my house, we call it the talking stick, and I'm aware that I hold it too often.
Yes. Yeah. It's the talking. I think in my house, we would use a talking tissue. I wouldn't give my 5-year-old a stick. But,
right.
But yeah, and I think it's really important then, because someone is being the receiver and being so patient, then that sender really needs to be specific and concise about the information that they're bringing up. We don't want to flood anybody with too much information. This is also not a memory exercise. So I'm not going to give you 12 sentences to mirror back to me. That's not nice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be specific. So rather than saying, you're always leaving your clothes out on the floor for me to pick up, that's not what I'm going to say. I'm going to pick a specific instance. So
yes. Yeah. So if we were to move forward with our example,
Yes.
the very first step as the sender is to just say, my frustration is,
Yeah.
and then we're going to fill in the blanks with, again, a specific, concise example using I statements. So that would be,
Yeah. So my language will never be my frustration is. So this is something that people complain about with the dialogue is it's too contrived. So I try to use my own language. So I might say what's bothering me is, right? Or the thing that's bothering me is yesterday when I was going to bed, I walked by the hamper and your socks were on the floor in front of the hamper.
right.
And I'm not going to say again.
Nope. Or your stupid dirty socks.
So that's where that was my parking lot that turned on because I almost said again. No.
Yes.
Yesterday, I walked by the hamper and your socks were on the floor in front of it.
Right. So then as the person, if I were playing receiver, I would say, what I'm hearing you say is yesterday as you were going to bed, you walked past my socks on the floor. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So then the next step would be for the sender to share their emotions. Now, this is really important because I think a lot of us kind of confuse emotion for thoughts. So this is where we would just pick a couple of words to express the feeling. But if we notice we're going into sentences, we're probably actually discussing a thought. So stay in emotion.
Yeah. And
Okay.
that means usually it means one word. It doesn't mean don't elaborate. So I'm going to say when I walked by the socks, I felt frustrated, angry, disrespected, confused, impatient, exhausted, sad.
Right. And then again, I would mirror back each of those words, checking in to make sure I'm getting that right.
Right.
The next step is to talk about your reactive behavior. So this is important because this is like if I'm a fly on the wall observing this interaction, what would I notice happening for the sender as they're walking past the socks, they're feeling all of those emotions? What am I actually seeing them do with their bodies in reaction to this event? So to give that example, what would I see?
Yeah. So when I saw your socks on the floor last night and I had all of those feelings, I reacted by just silently picking them up and putting them in the hamper.
Right. This is so important because I think our partners need to understand what this stuff actually looks like. Because if I were to be a third-party witness and I just see you silently pick them up, I have no indication that you're actually bothered. I have no indication that you're frustrated by this or upset by this. So to me, that just seems kind of like an innocuous, like, okay, she's cleaning up. But for our partner to start to understand how we react in these moments and that that's actually sending information, this is so important in helping us understand each other better. Right?
Yeah.
The next box is letting our partner into the story we're telling ourselves based on the event. So what would an example be here?
Yeah. So when we see the story I'm telling myself, it means that I'm accepting the fact that life's not full of a bunch of realities. It's perceptions. It's my reality and your reality, right? It's what I perceive to be reality. So the story I tell myself is all of the stuff that goes on in my head about why you're doing what you're doing, right? Because usually when we get upset with our partner, it's about what I believe is your behavior and your intention here. So the story that I told myself when I saw the socks on the floor and I picked them up and put them in the hamper was, you don't care about me. You don't mind that I am the one that's doing all the pickup. I told myself that it's like you see me like a slave. These all sound very attacking. And the softening part of it is that I'm telling myself this, recognizing it might not be the reality. So I'm not saying you think I'm a slave. I realized I was telling myself the story of Kiara thinks I'm a slave. Kiara thinks that it's completely my job to make sure everything is clean. Kiara doesn't care about the fact that I've asked her to pick up her socks 15 times in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And she just expects me to do it. Those are all stories I'm telling myself. I don't actually know if it's true, but that really fuels how I feel.
Yes. Yeah.
In our
That's a
dialogue,
really
I wouldn't
important part.
say any of that blah, blah, blah. I would just say the story I'm telling myself, and then you would just mirror it back.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So segueing from that is then really articulating the underlying fears or worries that come based on that story. So you're starting to think about, if this continues in my life, if this behavior, this pattern continues to show up, if I continue to feel this way, what am I worried might happen? So it's really important to try to go deeper here with those underlying fears.
Yeah. So my underlying fear is that I'm not going to be able to keep up with everything. My underlying fear is that it might even get worse, right? So the chaos that I feel in the house is going to get to a point where I can't stand it anymore. Or my underlying fear is that the stories that I'm telling myself are true, that you actually do think I'm a slave and you actually do think that everything is my responsibility. Yeah, so like my fears are like based on if this didn't get better, right? So, my underlying fear is I'm not allowed to bring this stuff up with you, that you don't hear me, and that it's going to extend to other issues, right?
Yeah. So the last part of the box is for the sender. And I think this one is, I don't know, maybe the most important, is to really connect this to what this reminds you of from your past or from childhood. Now, what I'll say is that a lot of times the example we're talking about, like the socks, you're not necessarily going to have a memory of your parents arguing over socks, but it's the dynamic. It's the stories and the worries and the fears and the feelings. So for example, if you're part of a house where one parent ended up resenting another parent because they felt like they were, in charge of everything and had to manage everything, that might be a dynamic that it's reminding you of. And that might be triggering this attachment piece or this really old wound. And I think that's really important because then it helps our partner understand, why did the socks even freaking matter? Right?
Yes.
And it's not the socks. It's because it's touching on something that's really deep in our bodies, and a dynamic or a pattern that we observed from a really young age that we're still carrying. So this is why, as a therapist, I like to spend a lot of time, and I know you do as well, spend a lot of time with this section to help us understand each other. And then when I've used this dialogue at home, which I have, again, I try to zoom in on this part. Like, what is this reminding me of?
Yeah.
So if you had to kind of share an example, what would that look like?
Yeah, because this is like the aha moment, usually for both, for the sender and the receiver, because I think like, all right, so I get why I'm like upset about these socks. I get why I don't want to be seen as a slave. I have to think, was there ever a time in my life when I felt like I was underappreciated, like what I was doing wasn't very valued, where the division of tasks was really inequitable? And once I start asking myself those questions, I go, okay. So this reminds me of being a kid, in a big family where a lot of the household chores at a certain stage of my life seemed to fall to me. And that seemed to be acceptable on the outside and it didn't feel okay to me. It didn't feel like it was equitable or fair. And I felt very underappreciated. I felt taken advantage of. And it really sort of set me up to feel like, oh, these things are my responsibility. And I was not even fully aware of where my responsibilities ended. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, I think, can be disarming for the receiver because now it's not about them. Right? It's not about them. It's not attacking them. It's not about criticizing them. It's about letting them in.
Yes. Yeah, because
to something painful.
You might not have known that I had that old wound. And I think, again, this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the podcast today, that you definitely wouldn't have wanted to hurt me. You wouldn't have wanted me to feel unappreciated and devalued. You wouldn't want me to think that you don't care, right? You wouldn't be trying to hurt me. You would have accidentally hurt me with what seems very innocuous. It's just a pair of socks, but it's not just about the socks, right? It's so important for us to develop a map of our partners. And part of that map is an understanding of where their wounds are, how they were created, and how they're triggered. And it's not that it's not my fault that my partner has wounds that happened long before I got there. But sometimes I can help him heal things I didn't break, right? So if I think about, when I was 19, I got into a accident as a pedestrian. I was hit by a truck and the truck rolled over my foot. So if you can imagine, every single bone in my left foot was broken. My foot was black. And it's been many, many years. It's been decades since that happened. So the physical wound has healed to a degree, but not all the way, but it's gone as far as it could. The nerve damage has healed as much as it can. I've done the treatments and whatever that I could do. But if I push on that spot on my foot, there's one particular spot, one bone, if I push, it hurts so much. Like I'm pushing on a broken bone. If I push on that exact same spot on my other foot, I don't feel anything, just pressure, right? So if you were to step on my foot, but you stepped on my left foot and not my right foot, I might scream out in pain if it was my left foot. And you'd go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, what the heck? I'm not that heavy, right? you might be like, what? Why are you overreacting? I'm not actually overreacting. It actually hurts way more on that foot. If you stepped on the other one, I probably wouldn't even say anything. I'd just move out of the way.
Yes.
And so you might tell yourself a whole bunch of stories about me, like, holy, like dramatic much? And like, what is wrong with you? Or you might tell yourself a story about you and your behavior. Oh my God, I'm so terrible. I can't believe I hurt her so much. And no, it's that there was an invisible wound because it's on my bone. You can't see it. And only I know about it unless I share it with you. Yeah. Then if you know, you might be careful not to step on my left foot. Extra careful, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And is that maybe annoying to try not to step on my left foot? I suppose. Sometimes people get really frustrated with their partner's wounds that they didn't create, right? I wasn't their parent. I wasn't their ex-partner. This is not my fault that they're so sensitive about this. Absolutely, it's not your fault. Is it going to injure you to make sure that you don't step on this wound, right? Or if you do, can you repair it? Can you acknowledge that you stepped on it without meaning to? Because that's usually what happens when we trigger our partners. It's unwitting. It's not on purpose. Can you acknowledge that? Can you validate why your partner is hurt and upset? Can you empathize with their feeling? And then, if necessary, can you make a repair?
Exactly. Yes. So this is the last part of the dialogue. Once the sender goes through all of those boxes and all of those parts and they're mirrored back accurately by the receiver, then it's the receiver's job to move into validation and empathy. And I think we both would want to pause here to really define what validation is, because I think this gets a bad rap. It can be a little bit confusing on the surface when you think about validation, thinking like, well, I guess I have to agree with what the person's saying. Yeah. And that's not the case. No. Right? Validation is not, I agree with you. It's stepping outside of your perspective and trying to step into your partner's perspective and saying from their perspective, with their experience and worldview, I can see how they would feel that way, even if I don't agree. So in that moment, my opinions don't actually matter. Yeah. It's not what I think. It's I can appreciate how this person standing in front of me could feel that way. That makes sense to me.
Yes. And this is where that piece of humility in a relationship is so important, right? Is it okay for me to say, yeah, okay, like I might not feel that way if it was me. Obviously not. You don't have the same history. You don't have the same stories. You don't have the same wounds. So you might not respond the way that your partner is responding right now. The socks on the floor might mean absolutely nothing to you except that the floor needs to be picked up. Yeah. Right? And that's because of your experiences and your life and your worldview. And that's okay that they're very, very different from your partner. What's not okay is for you then use that as a way to invalidate your partner and go, you're making a big deal about this. This is nothing. Yeah. I wouldn't feel that way if I was you. So I don't understand why you're so upset right now. That's not helpful. That's certainly not a humble stance. And it's incredibly invalidating. So instead, if we were going to validate, usually there's two parts. So one is, all right, so from what I know about you and how you were raised, what you grew up with, how important it is for you to have a clean house, how important it is for you to feel like we have an equitable relationship. I can see how when there's something that's gone on over and over and over that you've talked about, and then it happens again, how it could really upset you. I get that. And the second part of validation is for me to take actual responsibility for how I might be contributing to the problem, which is the part that people have so much trouble with.
Yeah. I didn't do anything.
That's right. But it wasn't me, or it's not a big deal. Instead, it's to be able to say, and yeah, I likely did leave my socks there. This stuff doesn't really stay on my radar. I don't really notice it the same way. And I do recall that you have said this really bothers you. And I probably did do it again. So I can see why you're upset right now and wanting to talk about this. There we go. Yeah. I wasn't saying I would feel the same as you. You're right. It's not about that.
No, exactly.
I get you.
I get you. And then if you can move into empathy after that, it kind of like emphasizes how much I understand you. Like if you have the ability to pick new feelings that your partner might feel that they haven't even stated, I think that can make the person feel that much more understood and seen and heard. Yeah. If you can say, hang on, after everything you just told me, I wonder if you might also be feeling X and Y. And they're like, oh, you're right. Yeah, I am feeling that way. Yep. Then it's like this magical moment of like, you get me, which isn't that what all of us want? Is just to feel seen and heard, right?
Yes. People also want people to change their behavior, and I will acknowledge that. And so I'll add on here that while the Imago dialogue is about hearing each other out and understanding more about why something triggers you a particular way, we can add on to it things like a behavior change request, which is a different Imago tool. But basically, you have to start with the dialogue first because you got to hear things out first. And then the behavior change request is when we add on a request for maybe for you to pick up your socks, something like that. Right. But in order to do that, we have to actually find the areas where we're flexible and inflexible. So what can we change? What are we willing to change and what are we not willing to change? And so much of that is about the safety in the relationship. I am far more willing to change things in a partnership where I feel very respected, where I feel safe and not, afraid of abandonment or afraid of wounding or afraid of invalidation, where I feel like there's this air of this environment, right? Where we've created a weather that is calm and warm and inviting and comforting. I'm much more likely to say I can be flexible here. I can change my behavior here. So that's part of why we do this work, is to keep working on the general climate of the relationship, change the weather to be a nice climate in general, so that when conflict ensues, it feels like an out of the blue storm, not, it's always stormy. We just got tornadoes and hurricanes and monsoons left, right, and center, right? That I don't feel like the general dynamic of my relationship is stormy. It's generally mild and sweet.
Yeah, for sure. Right? So I know the Gottmans just released a new book, and in that they talk about the bagel method, and it speaks to this exact idea of, drawing two concentric circles, and on the inner circle, we might want to write out the areas where we can't be flexible. And that's okay. There's some things that are really aligned with our values that if we feel like we give those things up, that we're giving up a part of ourselves. So if we're able to write those things out, have both partners do that. And then the outer circle are the things that maybe we can be flexible on. And like you said, over time, depending on the nature of the relationship, that might shift.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's right. I think we really need to have incentive for being flexible. So there is the book that you're referring to is the new one called Fight Right. And that's by Julie Gottman and John Gottman. And there's one thing that they say on page 319 that I really like. Well, there's lots of things they say that I really like, but I really like this part. It says, don't be the rock. If all we do is say no, then we become an obstacle our partners start to go around instead of collaborating with. We lose all power in the relationship. Partners who have the most influence are the ones who can be influenced. So you need to think about it that way, that if you are wanting change from your partner, you also have to be capable of change. You have to be able to accept influence from your partner just as much as you can ask for it, right? So maybe it's no big deal to me to have a dirty, messy house. Maybe that just doesn't bother me and I don't even notice it, but I know it really matters to my partner. So can I be influenced to change my behaviors a little bit, even though it's outside of my norm? It's outside of my comfort zone. That's compromise, right? On my end. And then on my partner's end, if they really like everything to be like 100% spick and span, and they might kind of have to accept that, okay, it's not always going to look like I could sell my house tomorrow.
Yeah.
Then what my therapist used to say is compromise is both parties being equally dissatisfied. He was funny that way, whereas sometimes he put this spin on it, I'm like, that doesn't sound good. But it's the reality. The reality is that if one person feels like they're always compromising, then it's not compromise, because both people have to be a part of it. They both have to be willing to give a little and get a little, right? And it can't be one-sided all the time.
Yeah.
All right. So if we're willing to be influenced, then that means that sometimes we're going to have to revisit our lumpy rugs, our bumpy rugs.
Yes.
So you know how we like to sweep things under the carpet that haven't gone well? We end up in a fight and we go to sleep and then we try to wake up and pretend like it didn't happen. And then you just have this like really lumpy rug.
Yes.
all the time. It's really not a good idea because you trip over it, right?
Yeah.
So it means that we have to have a willingness to go back and repair. And sometimes we have to repair, like we have to go back and try to repair something more than once. It depends on where it is on, I like to call it the Richter scale. If it's a pretty upsetting topic or a topic where people have really strong feelings about, you know, it might be a 9 out of 10. And so that's a big lump under the rug. And it means it might take quite a bit of revisiting, right? And take 2s and 3s and 4s to be able to look back and repair conflict that maybe didn't go very well. Maybe we had a big fight and it ended in a way that we didn't like, or we said things where if we could go back and do it again, we would do it differently, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of leads to the idea that we will all have our own versions of what happened. Gottman likes to say there's no God camera. It doesn't actually matter exactly what was said and how it was said in the fight. It does matter how you feel, what your perceptions were. There is this saying, I don't know who said it, that you may not always remember what somebody said, but you will remember how it made you feel.
I think it's Maya Angelou, isn't it?
It probably is, because Maya Angelou is my favorite poet.
Yes.
Yes. So it is really healing to go back and look at the wounds and attempt to heal them, even if we weren't the creators of them. But if we were, it's important to assume all realities are valid and revisit things. And one of the most important things to do if we're going to do that is to have the ability, like we talked about, creating these coping skills that help us to stay contained and regulated. We need to have this ability to sit on the riverbank, right? Hold that observer's mind, and without getting swept away into the emotion and the conflict, be able to witness what's going on between myself and my partner, what's going on within me so that I can stay regulated, or I can take a break if I need to be regulated, right? Because the goal is we want to smooth out the rug over time. We want to have a love map with our partner, of our partner, where we understand who they are and their triggers. We want to create safety at all times. And healing wounds create safety and connection. You know, when you have a really good conversation with your significant other, maybe about something that's really hurt you for a long time. Maybe your previous partner could not have that conversation with you or had injured you quite a lot there. And then you have a conversation with your current partner and you walk away and you feel so much more connected to them, so much safer, so much more known, right? Then I think that kind of leads into what Julie Manano says, right?
Yes, she says that a couple who's able to make a full repair of ruptures, they build trust, and the trust created by the repeated process of repairing ruptures leads to fewer ruptures.
Yes, which who doesn't want less conflict,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So
Hmm.
we don't want to avoid conflict, but can we create a different dynamic in our relationship where we have fewer ruptures?
Hmm.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
We have to change our behavior, but we can. And we can look back over time and go, wow, we would have fought about that had that come up, but we're not fighting about it now because we now engage differently, right? So we don't go back into old conflict because we're living in the past, right? Because we can't get over it. And because, we hear stuff like that, right? Like, why are you guys
We do.
dredging up old wounds, right?
Yes, or stop, get out of the past. It's over, it's done with. What's the point in doing this? Yeah.
Yeah. And what's the point?
Yeah.
Why do we?
Hmm.
Like, the idea is, so if I think about a forest and, like storms will rip through a forest and sometimes they topple a tree and the tree is still alive, but it's been like half uprooted, right? So you see the tree now lying on its side. Part of its roots are still in the ground. It's still alive. Now it's going to have to work a lot harder because it has to get all of what it needs, all its nutrients through parts of its roots instead of the rest of the roots that are now damaged, right? And the tree might continue to stay alive and it might keep growing, but it's going to be growing like in a horizontal way instead of a vertical way. So it's going to hit a whole lot of obstacles while it's
Yeah.
growing. It's going to have to adapt and grow around a bunch of other things in the forest because it was never meant to be growing horizontally,
Yeah.
right? If I stop and I go back and look at the damage, this is the thing everybody wants to avoid. I don't want to look at it. I don't want to live in the past. Don't live in the past. Be in the present. Recognize that the tree is broken in the present. And then if I actually can right that tree and get those roots back in the ground, that tree is going to thrive and it's going to be able to grow vertically like it always was supposed to. So it's not going to have to encounter nearly as many things in its way. It's probably going to do a heck of a lot better. So why do we go back at old wounds? So that we can heal them, create a sturdier foundation, and create a better future with our partner.
Yes, it's the past, present, future. We look to the past to heal the present and pave a new way in the future.
That's right. And you've mentioned before when we've talked about this, how these skills, everything that we've talked about today, are transferable, right?
Yes. Yes, with all of our relationships. So we talk about this in the context of couples, but it relates to parent-child dynamics, to friends, to siblings. You can kind of extend it anywhere in your life. And I think that's important too, because couples have this unique ability to trigger the crap out of each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what you might notice is if you extend some of these skills to other relationships, like a friendship, for example, it might be a lot easier and it might feel more effective than doing it with a partner. Because with a partner, we are often hitting on attachment stuff a little bit differently. The emotional investment, there's more of a cost. It feels more risky. So I guess I want to call that out because trying it with somebody else and feeling like, well, that worked, but it won't work with my partner. It doesn't mean it's not effective. It just means that this is a skill that both people need to be committed to, that is going to require a lot of practice over time. And being committed to that ongoing practice can have a really profound effect on the outcome of the relationship, but it just could feel a little different with a partner.
Yes, agreed. We're always trying to build our forest of connection, but if you think about forests, take time to grow, right? So if you're using tools, it's going to take time to get used to using the tools. It's going to take time to heal wounds and then to watch what that looks like as things start to grow differently and repair, right?
And with any skill, like a lot of times couples will do Imago with them and it feels so foreign at first and really uncomfortable and really scripted. It's like any skill. It's like learning to play an instrument. Like at first, when you first start to get your way around an instrument, it feels really uncomfortable and you don't know what to do with your hands and what to do with your mind. And, it's not natural. So Keep that in mind, that that's part of the process. And then the ongoing practice, you'll be able to integrate it in a way that feels more natural to the two of you.
Yes. So we want to say thank you to all of our listeners for sharing your time with us. Remember, if today you are feeling alone in the valley, if the trees are looking broken all around you, look for what's still growing, what is still alive. Start there, repair, keep growing your forest of connections, and we are right there with you.